Do you remember this? This, the theme song to The Young and the Restless. My brother, today's guest, Freeman Michaels, is probably going to kill me for starting off this week's episode with this. I just had to. Imagine yourself as a soap opera star. You're on the set, sharing your lines, fully committed, fully in the moment, doing your best. For some, it might be a gift to be able to follow your passion as an actor. For others, it might seem like misguided energy and not on path. I'm curious, have you ever done something that did not feel like you? Like you were just going through the motions but knew deep down it was not your deepest work in the world? Check in right now. Just slow down for a minute and ask yourself, am I doing my deepest heart's work? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? What does my heart know? What am I ignoring? What am I pretending is not there? Just listen to yourself. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to feel. We sometimes do things that do not fully serve our deepest purpose, and sometimes that's okay, until it isn't. There will come a time when enough is enough, and we must do what we love. As Mark Anthony says, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. A true statement, yes? And I also believe that doing what we do not like doing is the key to certain misery and a slow death. And frankly, I'm not ready to be miserable or die. I'm guessing it's the same for you. LL Cool J shares it this way: do what you love, you'll be better at it. It sounds pretty simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't get this one right away. Get it? A recent Gallup poll states that only 13% of people worldwide actually like going to work. This freaks me out, actually. Are you one of them? Now, I'm not saying that this week's guest, Freeman, did not love being a soap star. He actually loved it, but at the same time, he also knew there was something deeper. Have you stepped fully into your life's work? Have you faced the fears that are stopping you from taking the leap and breaking free? Here's the thing. Knowing what is stopping you is a great first step. Then, you must do something about it. No amount of wishful thinking or distractions or addictions will clear the way for your heart to experience fulfillment. If we don't know what we are looking for, we will never find it. This powerful quote from Scott Dinsmore, founder of Live Your Legend. His commitment to finding your passion and living it reached far and wide. Unfortunately, Scott sadly passed away after being hit by falling rocks while nearing the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. Here he shares more truth in his TEDx talk in San Francisco in 2012. This video has garnered over 4 million views to date.
As we finish up, I have just one question to ask you guys, and I think it's the only question that matters. And it's, what is the work you can't not do? Discover that. Live it. Not just for you, but for everybody around you. Because that is what starts to change the world. What is the work you can't not do?
What is the work you can't not do? What is the work you can't not do? Completely brilliant question. What is that for you? Really think about it. And again, I have said this many times on multiple podcasts, find your passion and live it before you die. If you don't, you will be miserable and self-medicate somehow just to get by. And who wants to just get by? I remember a long time ago when I was working as the Assistant Director of Admissions for the Art Institute of Los Angeles, Orange County. I can honestly say that I loathed working there. One thing I did love, however, was meeting with potential students and their parents to discuss their application process and potential matriculation into the college. The irony is this: I am not a fan of structured education, but I am a fan of learning and being educated in applicable and useful things. I prefer accelerated learning styles like workshops, one-on-one coaching, and shamanic ways of rapid transformation. I can honestly say that the times I have done ayahuasca, for example, have been far more transformational and taught me more than years of schooling ever could. Ah, the irony. Life can be full of it, yes? A favorite quote from Howard Thurman: don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Welcome to the Face Your Dragon podcast, where we help you, a messenger with a mission, leverage your fear to amplify your voice in the world. On the show, we open up the concept that what you are most afraid of and most resisting are the very things that will set you free. With courage, with clarity, with contribution, you can have it all. This show will engage in deep, enriching conversation with thought leaders, best-selling authors, celebrities, athletes, icons, and regular Joes who have faced their fear and are now using it to create impact in the world. I'm Brad Axelrad, and I'll be your host. I'm super excited to share this week's guest, my dear brother, Freeman Michaels. He's one of the sharpest minds of anyone I know. A one-time soap opera star, multi-million-dollar real estate developer, and high school teacher, Freeman brings a unique background and perspective to his current role as a corporate trainer and coach, working with some of the largest organizations on the planet. He ran an interview show with podcast guest Barnett Bain called Cutting Edge Consciousness, where they interviewed all the biggest names in the self and spiritual development movement and major celebrities, people like Don Miguel Ruiz and Eckhart Tolle, Selma Hayek, and many more. Listen in as this brilliant leader shares how to get real and leverage your fears into fuel. Freeman, it's so great to have you today on the Face Your Dragon podcast. How you doing, bro?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I love these conversations and never truly know where they're going to go. And the first thing that popped into my mind as soon as we started was, okay, dude, you were a soap opera star. Can we just touch on that? I'm so curious what that experience was like for you, kind of, you know, what fears you had to face and how was that experience for you, man?
Wow, that's an interesting place to start. Sure. Well, you know, look, I was an actor and I was offered the opportunity to sign with an agent who was very clear that they wanted to get me into soaps. And I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, I'd never really watched a soap. I kind of thought they were dumb, but I didn't know that they were dumb. I mean, whatever it is, it's a job. And I'd heard the story that it was a good launching pad for a lot of actors. So when I got to LA, initially I got a pilot that wasn't really a soap necessarily, and it was really brilliant. Like to date, it's still one of the best things I ever did. And, you know, this is back in the early to mid 90s, and reality TV was just starting. The Real World had sort of taken the world by storm. So the same company that produced The Real World, Bunim Murray, Mary Ellis Bunim and Jonathan Murray, had a new show, a pilot, and I was in it. I got cast in it. It was really great. But, you know, not all pilots work out, and this was one that didn't work out. And so very shortly after that, I got on Young and the Restless. You know, it was a trip. I mean, there was sort of two parts to it. One part was it was fun because, you know, like everyone was stopping me on the street, and like there was this, you know, I was in these soap magazines and all of that felt like really affirming. And there was another part that got a little bit it bummed me out because the storyline was kind of dumb. I mean, I was 26 at the time or something, and I was playing 19, and I don't know, it felt stupid. the storyline.
Got it.
But well, I mean, there were parts of it I liked. You know, it's a mixed bag. You know, I don't think it's I think here's what bums me out about it sort of today. It's fine that you brought it up, but it's interesting that people sort of point to that as one of my great triumphs. Of all the things creatively I've ever done, that's like in the bottom third tier. Like it's not one of those great things I did. It's just one of the things, because I did nearly 100 episodes, 95 and 96 in that span, that people point to it and say, wow, that's amazing. You did almost 100 episodes. You were on all the time, and you were in the, you know, going to the awards and the magazines, and, you know, isn't that great? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's an interesting experience, but by no means does that define me.
Right. But let's talk about that, because I'm certain there were fears you had to face. There were aspects of yourself that you really had to look at and also sell out. And what came to me as I heard you talking there was that there were parts of you, I'm guessing, that we all sort of ignore at times when we know we should be listening, like, oh, this isn't really my calling. And I'm projecting a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's right.
It wasn't your deepest work. It wasn't your deepest heart's work. And you knew that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you know, that's where I struggled, is that, you know, I had done this pilot that was amazing, that was so much more aligned with sort of self-expression, you know. So let me go back to the pilot for a second. So it was like kind of a soap opera, but done real world style. And so they give us kind of a point A and a point B, and they'd fill in, or even a point C, let's say, and they'd fill in sort of what we had to cover, the point B, but we had to make it up. And it was so fun to create the character. And then you'd pick up a lot of things in the confessional, right? In the traditional reality show, you have the confessional. You go in the confessional and you'd, you know, talk about what happened in these scenes you filmed. And so I was really making it my own narrative, and I was really speaking from my own heart and own experience. And I was in this very kind of raw place as an actor where I was really going for honesty. You and I kind of have this conversation. In fact, it might have been you, the radical honesty, who turned me on to, I think it was a book, or was that you that told me? But anyhow, it didn't matter. I was really into some radical honesty. And yet I created this character that wasn't me, but still had threads of me and felt so raw and so real and so truthful. So long story short, that was amazing. And then being on The Young and the Restless with this kind of silly storyline, it was tough. And I didn't really want to be on the show. In fact, the big showdown occurred when I ended up off the show for myriad reasons. It was a very, like, it's one of those crazy Hollywood stories. But anyhow, it doesn't matter. And I said to my agent and manager, I don't want to do soaps anymore. And my agent actually ultimately gave me an ultimatum and said, look, you're a soap opera star. I can get you on another soap. The fact that you want to do other things is nice, but right now, I can get you work. And there's 100,000 Screen Actors Guild members in Los Angeles, and they all we need to find categories for them as agents and ways to pitch them. I have one for you. So sorry, but you're a soap star. And ultimately we left that, my manager who was with me, that I could do other things. We left that agent, even though it was a very reputable agent, and went to a new agent and had to kind of establish myself and yada, yada, yada. So. And it took a long time. I still was primarily going out on soap stuff, in part because they were calling for me. Okay. And I tested for a bunch of shows, and it took a couple years to break out of it. And I had to do guest starring on other things like Ally McBeal, Profiler, the X-Files, and other things to sort of snap the I'm a soap star thing.
So what was it sort of deep down? Kyle Cease talks about this place deep down, and I love where he goes with that context. But what was it in your gut or in your heart that felt like this wasn't it? Had you put your finger on it yet? And were you also too afraid to maybe take the leap? Oftentimes we stay in what Gay Hendricks talks about, our zone of excellence or our zone of competence, because we're afraid to take that big leap to our zone of genius, right? So what was that?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that this is not just a quandary at the time, but a quandary today, is sort of navigating my inspiration with a kind of practicality of what works and what feeds the family. And so it's interesting because I found my way to corporate training and, executive coaching, and I'm working with companies and organizations right now. It's interesting because I find fulfillment in it in a way that I didn't know I would, right? So the answer to your question in a particular way is I don't know, because there is this inspired place, and the fantasy is we're always going to create from that inspired place. And don't get me wrong, the inspiration's critical. We got to have those sort of peak experiences. But they're always a gift, right? They're always kind of an accident. You kind of wander into genius. Genius isn't something you can put in a bottle and say, here, I'm going to do genius now.
Right.
Gay may call it. Does he call it zone of genius?
Yeah, zone of genius.
Yeah.
Yep.
He does call it zone of genius.
Yep.
Anyhow, so... Yeah, but look, you put yourself in your best shot of getting there, but the fact that it happens, this is why I like collaboration so much, is that the chances of it occurring spontaneously when you're working with people you enjoy is greater. When you're in a vacuum trying to do your own thing, whether it's writing or singing or whatever, it's harder. So I love ensemble things, plays, or in the case of the trainings, I'm teaching collaboration, right? I'm training in that, and I'm collaborating with Susan Leahy, who, as you know, is a blast.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just fun, and we get to create all kinds of things.
Well, let's talk about that, because I love you mentioned that can feed off of other people and create that synergy. And, as I sit here in a little bit of isolation by choice in Costa Rica, staring out at the jungle, channeling the energy from the jungle, I also get the power of the synergistic kind of bouncing off of each other. I'm curious your take. I get that you might be a little bit on the high extroversion side. I'm a little bit kind of down the middle, and even might lean more towards introvert, certainly in chapters in my life. And it's strange to even go down this rabbit hole of this introvert-extrovert conversation, wondering how many listeners, are both challenged in either of those, being alone a lot or being around people a lot. Where does the energy come from? How do we generate that energy? How can we generate the synergy through channeling the energy of others, or through God, or through our surroundings, whatever it is. I mean, any thoughts around that? And would you do that on stage or when you're acting? How would you feed off of energy?
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's interesting. Yes. And the fact that you're in nature, for me, nature is highly creative. One of the things I did when I moved to Los Angeles was I got an apartment right by LACMA, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and I got a membership to LACMA. And I would go there all the time, and I would just walk around in LACMA, absorbing, if you will, the creativity. And I had certain favorite spots, and I kind of knew where to go for certain kinds of inspiration. Right now I'm really hooked on podcasts. So I listen to various podcasts as I'm walking around in the neighborhood. I take my walk every day, and I get fired up. And it's interesting because one of the pools, tugs, if you will, within my psyche is this sense of being productive and doing something. And the other side, which is not doing, the being side, and the sort of waiting for inspiration and putting myself in a fertile, sort of environment whereby something can rise up. Because it's always, again, it's always a gift. It's like everything I've ever written that was cool was a download. And the inspired moments in acting are a stumble upon, and the stuff that goes on in the training room, prepare, yes, but then let go of everything you prepared,
right.
And then something spontaneous happens, and Susan and I afterwards go, wow, that was amazing. And then, of course, we try to capture it a little bit. And you can, to some degree, you can kind of repeat, but you still have to leave that space for it to organically find its best expression, or find its inspired moment. I call them perfect moments. That's what I call them. And there again, that's something, it's just a gift. It's like, wow, and it's so crazy because there's a kind of clarity in those moments. I call them top of the mountain moments sometimes too, because there's a perspective where everything is in right alignment, where things just sort of fit. Even if they were once difficult, they sort of all blend into, I get it, And the trick here is when we have those moments is we try to, again, capture them in bottles. And it's okay. You can write something down, and it's okay. It's normal. I get it. But it's fleeting. You can't really keep it.
Well, I mean, almost everything in life is really that sort of aha moment, and it's there. And even in dreams, I'll wake up from dreams and think, I'll never forget that dream. It was so vivid and lucid.
Right.
Of course I'll remember it, right?
Right, totally.
And I get the folks who write their dreams down, and I'd recommend everyone that's listening right now to write your dreams down. I never do, and I regret it every time.
Yeah.
But maybe, there's part of me that realizes we're not maybe supposed to hold on to some of these things, and that the juice in life is the fleeting, the paradox there, in the fleetingness of these moments of genius or inspiration or synergy.
I think so. I mean, I think it's both, right? So I think the idea of writing it down and feeding off of these inspired moments and kind of going back to them and returning to them, is great. And not hanging on so tightly, because then it becomes sort of, brittle. It becomes stale. It becomes like, okay, that was – I mean, it's so interesting because Susan and I were working on something yesterday, and she said, I'm tired of that, whatever it was that we do. And I was like – oh my God, that's so great that you just said you're tired of it. Because, I'm tired of the stories that, I tell some of my same stories over and over, and I get tired of my own story. Thank goodness. And look, the people who annoy me most, again, big mirrors, is the people who repeat their story. And I'm like, aren't you tired of your story already?
Let's talk a little bit about your story, though, because I know, you were a multi-million-dollar real estate investor turned transformational leader. What's that sort of narrative storyline?
I lost all my money.
You faced that dragon, buddy. You built it.
Well, one way, yeah. So I was when I was an actor, I bought a condo first when I was on Young and the Restless, and I had some buddies. We were all sort of struggling actors, and I was on a show, but I mean, I still had that mentality and had the buddies. And so my dad came down from San Francisco. We fixed it up, and we made some dough on it. Basically, I realized it was worth a lot more, and it just seemed like I found a business. So I would buy. So then we bought some buildings. My dad and I bought 2 buildings. Ultimately, I bought, I think, 12 buildings total, 12 transactions of buying, because I also bought some land. You know what I did is I started a mastermind group. I read Think and Grow Rich, of course, and said, okay, I want us to do a mastermind group. And so I did, and I found some folks and started attracting some really great, interesting people, including a couple developers. And that's how I started learning development. So I partnered with one. We bought some land and subdivided and, made $1 million on that transaction. And I was like, wow, that's great. Like 6 months, $1 million. It was a little longer than that, maybe a year, but not much more than a year. Yeah, so I figured out I could do that. And then I started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and inviting friends to participate and sort of sold all my properties and went full hog on the real estate development. And then the market crashed. And when it crashed, I was exposed and I didn't survive. I had to sell things off for pennies on the dollar and I had to liquidate and ultimately go bankrupt. But, it was interesting. I'm two parts of me. I was relieved and panicked, both. I mean, I was on the floor of my office just weeping at night, just couldn't believe I'd blown it and felt like such a loser. But also equally felt like, everything would be fine. And also, thank God that ended because it wasn't my life. Like, it's fine, I did it, but I didn't want to be a real estate developer. And I just didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. It wasn't fun.
I so get that. I mean, I have my real estate broker's license in California, and kind of the same scenario. When the bottom fell out, I was like, yeah, I don't really love this industry enough to ride this ship down and wait for it to come back up, right?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine right now going out and doing it. Like the whole thing I used to do, I'm like, oh God, if I had to do that, I'd slip my wrists. I have no desire to go find property and then go to the city and see what we can do and rah, 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 rah. But I was into it for the moment I was into it. I mean, I guess that's another piece of the puzzle is I wrote a chapter in my first book called Push to Grow. And I have a cousin I grew up with. He passed when we were both 33. We were the same age. But that side of the family had a lot of money. He got a crazy cancer and died, and it was a year-long period where I got to witness him exiting, which was a crazy, cool life experience. I mean, not fun, again, excruciating, but in a particular way, kind of brilliant. But the long and the short of it is, he had all these advantages, and I had this huge revelation. In fact, it may be even something he said to me where it was a real big disadvantage. Because I had all these odd jobs. I had to make do. My folks didn't have a lot of money. And so they didn't just give me things. I had to go figure out ways to get it. And it's one of the ways I feel like I'm disabling my own kids to some degree, in that there was something in the struggle and the ability to figure stuff out and so forth that really served me. I don't know why I brought that up, but anyhow, so Push to Grow. I was pushed. And I think going back to all the ways in which seeking out, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I make money? Okay, how do I do this? I wander into things. Again, the whole idea that I'm doing corporate training and corporate coaching, at one point in my life, that would have been absurd. I would have laughed at you. I would have been like, I'm an artist. There's no way. And now it's incredibly fulfilling and creative, and I love what I'm doing. So yeah, I wouldn't have guessed at that. But the good news is I was sort of pushed to go figure out a way, because the way I was coaching and working wasn't making a living. And so I shifted gears and started doing some executive coaching and started working with our mutual friend Gabrielle and doing some corporate training. And I went, oh my God, I love this,
Well, yeah, it's so interesting because I remember, I don't know, years ago, we've known each other, I guess, 6 or 7 years at this point, but we would talk about sort of the difference between the consumer coaching or the B2B to C and then the sort of B2B coaching or consulting. And I, for years, had this story that, oh yeah, the corporate stuff, it's all for money. They're not really doing the deep transformational work. It's a sellout a little bit. That was kind of my story. And then, in recent years, I've really softened that and found that the value actually can be created there, and possibly even more, because the corporations have so much of the money and steer a lot of societal shifts, right?
Big time.
So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, and look, this is a population that hasn't read a bunch of new agey stuff. So when it's brought to them in the context of business, which by the way is a fantastic context to have a transformational conversation. So in the context of business where there's very clear objectives, part of what gets really loosey-goosey when we're talking about personal growth, people come in kind of, the general premise is, I want to fix something. That's the general premise. And the relief is you're perfect just the way you are. And while that's true, it's not sufficient. It's very hard to keep just applying I'm perfect right where I am when things don't feel very perfect. And the constantly seeking to find, the way or enlightenment or all of that, which, it's fine. I mean, okay, but business is a great context. And look, I believe in business. I believe in business when it's done in the spirit of creating value and finding your market and your customer and serving and so forth. And even in the coming up in business, the idea of mentoring, so the leader in the context of how I work with business is really a facilitator. It isn't, so there's sort of two ways the leader works out. One person wants to lead because they want the fame and the glory and the authority and whatever that comes with it. And that's okay. You can start there. But the other way is sort of the servant leader, right? That's leading in the context of serving and supporting and creating something and drawing people in and raising people up. And so people who start in the first sort of quadrant find their way off into, if they grow and have enough sort of, reflective moments in life, to the other. And it's so much more rewarding and so much more fulfilling. And for the, let's say, a young person trying to find their way in an industry, to have a mentor and to there's a book called Super Bosses. It's pretty brilliant. And it follows several super bosses. Alice Waters from Chez Panisse in Northern California is one of them. And just how many amazing chefs come out of her kitchen, as it were. They started off as a line cook or a sous chef or whatever, and she just raises people up. She draws out their natural talent. She empowers them. And so she's a super boss. And I think about that in business, what a gift. Business, when it's done well, is beautiful. And it's a really great context to do transformational work. How do I create value here? How do I create value? How do I reach my customer? How do I serve them? How do I, draw them in? How do I sustain the relationship? And there's something that we're working on together in this business context that's tangible. You can point to it. And so it's a fantastic arena for transformation. It's a fantastic arena for doing the sort of heavy lifting of growing and evolving and so forth.
People will often ask, how do you help people face their dragons, Brad? And what do you do? And I say, look, I oftentimes have an answer for that or a process per se, meaning we'll go through the normal steps of building a thought leader business, whatever that looks like, and all the dragons will surface. So the natural state of business or building or growing a business is going to create all the dragons to surface. Then we get to what I say, find, face, and ride the dragon. So in the context of that, you're saying that business is a great sort of framework to surface things. Can you speak about how you kind of surface it? What are you guys doing that you can share?
I'll share the latest sort of aha. Our platform is leading to team. There's actually a first step, which is called group to team, which is the distinction between group, which is organizing around self-interest, and team, which is organizing around shared interest. And a lot of people call themselves a team, but they're really operating in group, right? And so we just make that distinction. And then we train people to recognize the individual is responsible for where they're orienting towards. And so finding shared interest or common cause is what elevates not just the individual, but the collection of individuals into team. And it's the most functional place to be. I mean, that's where the innovation, the creativity, and the support and the productivity all occurs. But the leading to team, which is the second phase, which is the leadership training, is where we talk about this shift in leading as facilitating, as growing others and finding common cause. And so I had this experience recently in the grocery store. I go at a particular time, LA, it's Ralph's, it's crazy. It's everyone goes at 4:00 in the afternoon and remembers, oh shoot, I gotta get dinner. And there's this mad rush through the aisles. And the one I go to on Wilshire is just busy. It's busy, And I went in, and I usually get into my mindset of get really clear, get really focused, and just drive the results. Get the 5 things and get the hell out.
The hunter, no gatherer going on there.
Well, and not just that, compete for the for the space and for the the last bagel. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, something like that. I mean, some version of that.
Yeah.
So I'm cruising the aisles, and I said, wait a minute, leading to team. So in leading to team, what you're doing is you're finding common cause. And so all of a sudden I'm sort of waving people past me, and I'm offering to get something for this lady. And there's this whole way that I'm in this different mindset and having this really delightful experience. Wow. And so are others. I'm inviting them in. So, this leading to team concept where I'm constantly co-creating, constantly looking at every interaction as a co-creation, and it's a fulfilling one if we have a common cause or a shared interest. And so as a leader, my job is to find common cause, find shared interest in every interaction going on in my life. That's how I want to walk the world. So, I mean, that's a weird example, but that was this sort of like, wow, the supermarket. Because it's interesting in these mundane places. I don't know if you and your work do this, but we often create practices. Like it's enough to say intention without action is delusion, right? So if you're going to intend something, now we have to find an action, a practice that you can do ritualistically to embody more and more of the thing it is you say you want or who you want to be and so forth in relationship with the thing you want. So yeah, the practice and so often it's the mundane things like the supermarket, or for me, I get competitive and I want to back off that. And that mostly comes up when I drive. So I have a contemplative practice, a meditation practice that I'm integrating on a good day into my driving. And so.
Well, it's so interesting. I just scripted the Satyen Raja with Warrior Sage script a couple days ago, and that's the next podcast coming out, and we talk about, or I sort of frame it as paradox, and what he talks about is the downside or the negative side of massive action, and and rituals, and I pull in a lot of rituals there, and even pull in Tony Robbins talking about rituals, and ironically, Tony's a lot about massive action, right? And as am I, and it's so interesting to hear this paradox there. You're right, rituals are important, action's important, but when do we over-ritualize or over-spiritualize or over-actionize something to the point where we're missing the beauty and the grace of life and the synchronicity? And that's what you're really talking about. It's like there's this grace that can happen if you'll hold the paradox almost.
So this balancing, if you will, of sort of will and action with being, right, with not doing, right, the doing with the not doing. Is always, I think, a dance, and again, I think I said this earlier that, sometimes I'm sort of wandering around listening to podcasts or reading or trying to figure out where the next inspiration is going to come from. And I know enough to follow that. But in moments, it feels like, what the heck am I doing? I need to be doing something. And sometimes I do. I need to stop wandering and put it into form. Like, okay, I've got enough ideas. Go put it into form. Do something with it. But I think sort of mastering that is sort of not mastering it. In other words, because I get worried about, worry isn't the right word. What concerns me is over structuring, over arrival. Like, we're all looking in our lives for these points of arrival. Like, I've arrived, I've succeeded. We love telling our triumph story, and there's nothing wrong with that. We need triumphs or it's a mess, right? We have to win sometimes. But we also have to honor that if that's our orientation, then we crunch down infinite possibility and we're living in this really small, sort of, the 5 results I can qualify as success and organizing back to them all the time. And that's lame. I mean, I don't want to live like that. But I mean, it's typical. Yeah, it is.
And part of the way that you steered a lot of this conversation with Barnett on the radio show, can you speak to that just for a minute? What you guys were doing there and what?
Yeah, no, that was a great experience. I mean, just the opportunity, and you're going through this now, to speak with so many cool people who you talked about Gay Hendricks and his book and The Big Leap. Or Miguel Ruiz, who of course we had on many times, and other folks who are heroes of mine, and to get to know them and have them on the show repeatedly, and just to have a conversation for 5 years. I mean, it's one long conversation.
Wow.
If you go back and listen to any point in it, I can kind of point to, oh, that's what we're working with. So as a life experience, it's so interesting because one of the ways I kept trying, we got to where we had some sponsorship, and so we were down to sort of nothing out of pocket. But I don't know if we ever got to nothing out of pocket, but we never made money, to be perfectly clear.
Right.
And there were moments in time my wife was like, okay, so why are you doing all this? It's your job, and yet you're kind of, not making money at it. What's that about? And again, it's this idea of my job or my success as a person can't be measured by money. Now, it's not to say that money isn't one of the measurements. I mean, of course, if everything I do makes no money, I'm blowing it. Like, I want to create value and I want to receive value for the value I'm creating, but there's a whole arena of growth and learning and success as a person that can't be quantified by dollars. But it's a sickness in our culture, and I have it too. So, I mean, I don't want to make it just a sickness. I don't want to rail against it, but I do want to have a healthy perspective. Like, okay, not everything I do in my life has to be measured of, did I hit this? Did I get the degree? Did you get a degree for doing that? No, but I learned a lot. Did you make any money? No, but I learned a lot.
Yeah.
And it was very fulfilling, and it was creatively awesome. And
well, let's talk about that, because there's an energetic here with regards to having the desire or need, if you will, in our core. I mean, I've got this place of where I've got to be in transformation at this point, or I'm just not feeling whole and complete. I need to be providing some level of insight and transformation in the world and contribution and have meaning. And, but for years I ran the center and produced hundreds of events and oftentimes wouldn't make money. And I was on this sort of, I was on a train, sometimes not sure where it was going, but I needed to trust, like you're suggesting, that it was going somewhere. There was a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity. I mean, I'm part of the Association of Transformational Leaders with you because of all of that contribution I was in for thousands of hours over the 7-year span. And, I think the point is this: sometimes we may not see the actual benefit to us and to others until sort of hindsight kicks in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think, and this is a little bit of Barnett language, you brought up him earlier, the tyranny of the point of arrival. And that, we have this story in our culture of the success story, the overcoming obstacles and achieving something. And usually we have it held as something really grand, and then we won the Academy Award. We love this story. We call it the triumph story, right? So it's, look, it's part of the game, but we have to know that it's bullshit. I mean, we have to have the observer to recognize, oh, that's just something I've bought into. I'll give you the closest analogy for this. So as you know, and we've talked about this many times, I've done a lot of men's work. I'm not so into men's work right now because, look, and even the looking out at the terrain, there's a huge conversation about women and women's roles and women's rights and so forth and so on in our culture. And I'm way in that conversation. In fact, part of what I do is a women in leadership training with Susan and Gabrielle and others in Mexico with women leaders down there. I've been hired by Citibank to do this program down there. And so it's amazing to be in that conversation. Here's what I recognize. There are certain beliefs, patterns, whatever, that are what I was raised with. Let's call them chauvinism. There's a chauvinism that I was raised with. And so there's certain things I see through the lens of that, even if I don't want to. So the way we've always described this, and by we, I think this is sort of something Barnett and I have both spoke about, is it's like there's two paths, right? There's the path I know and I've been on, and then there's this parallel path that I'm creating. And we have to be okay with the fact that they both exist simultaneously, and we flip between them. So in moments, I'm in a really open-minded, I'm seeing women as humans and people, and I'm not in my programming, and there's this sort of, wow, this is great. And then the next moment, I'm, objectifying a woman because my mindset goes to that because I was taught to do that. And I don't know what's nature and nurture, and I'm not trying to at this point. I'm not trying to define, well, part of that's your nature. I don't know if that's true or not. But it doesn't matter, because when I'm in that space, it ultimately doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel fulfilling. It separates me from the connection that's possible. So, but I'm not making it wrong, because it just is. It's kind of like we go back to the fear conversation, which is, I know the point, is that the biggest challenge with our fears is that we don't know that it's okay to be scared.
Right.
We think we have to overcome it, and we do, but most of the overcoming has to do with just being like, okay, yeah, and I'm scared. You asked a question way earlier, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of, scatting around like a jazz player. Okay. When you asked the question about was I scared on Young and the Restless, I was. I remember early on, I had been picked up for like some number of episodes, but not as a contract player. I didn't become a cast member initially. And so I went on and I kind of had to prove myself, and I felt all this fear. And then I had this moment of just saying, I belong here, and going for it and having fun and knocking it out of the park. And I totally belonged. But to say I wasn't scared would be totally untrue. Just enough of me, and I was scared the whole way through, but there was enough of me that was clear on what I was doing, committed enough that the fear wasn't dominating my experience. And in moments I would forget to be scared, you know, and that's what I'm talking about. So like the biggest challenge I think we have with our fears is trying to get over them. What I want to say about it is it okay to be scared, but be more inspired than I am scared? Be more committed to what I'm creating than I am scared. Like scared, yeah, that comes too. You know, not pretend like I'm not scared.
It's really about courage, right? I mean, we're never not going to be scared. And
That's right.
A lot of folks who are out in the space that talk about blast through your fears, overcome your fears, and it's not about that. It's about, I think, about using it. I actually like to say it's about taking advantage of the pharmacy that we've got and that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism and using it as power, as fuel. Yeah, that's really about it. So how are you doing that? Share what you're up to and how do people find you, and how are you sort of using that awareness that we just spoke of in what you're doing in the training?
So the trainings are organic. The work is, so you talk about context sometimes, context and content, right? The context is what's important. The content we figure out as we go along. It doesn't mean we don't plan the content. We don't plan the training. We plan the training, but we also let go of that. So the work that I'm committed to is collaboration. And from a sort of global perspective, we have to get to a point as a species to recognize we're interdependent, not just with all the other humans in the world, but with the biosphere and the, you know, all these things. We have to move back into harmony. And so the collaborative process is really recognizing this shared interest. And it's so cool and fun to collaborate and to be on a team. What we know about team is it feels good. You know, everyone feels seen and heard and cared about, and so organizing towards that is a beautiful aspiration. We slip into groups sometimes. Of course we do, and that's the natural sort of default setting. Just like chauvinism is part of who I am as a person based on the programming. I'm committed to the opposite of chauvinism, which is a kind of inclusion and a partnering and seeing someone 100% as a human and not genderizing them and having my presuppositions about what that means, what it means to be a woman or a man, but that all comes along too. So I mean, that's the thread of everything we've been talking about, is that to hold them both. Where I think we go terribly wrong is trying to fix and argue against the things that we don't like, or to argue for, the folks who are kind of caught in their ignorance, who I think of the guy with the monster truck with no fear on the back. And I'm like, dude, you're defined by your fear. I mean, you're running around saying I'm not scared, but all you're reflecting is how scared you are. And it's kind of like, so we don't want to double down on our prejudice. We don't want to double down on the things that don't really serve us. We want to recognize they don't serve us without making them terribly wrong. That's the big gig. And then moving into collaboration is a gift. So to have a strong sense of self, to have a sense that I deserve to have an opinion or a point of view, but not identify with our point of view, right? That's a really core distinction. I want my kids to know that they get to have a point of view, but I don't want them defined by their point of view. So that the point of view becomes just having strong opinions and ideas. There's a podcast called Strong Opinions Loosely Held. I love that.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic podcast, by the way. But yeah, that's it. So, I mean, if you want me to wrap it up. And what I'm up to, look, I don't really even have an agenda. I'm not seeking out, I don't have anything to sell. I mean, of course we do on the website, and there's Empowering the Leader in You, and there's things people can buy. But I'm not looking, people have to find me and want to work with me. That's where I'm at in my life. So I'm just kind of saying what I have to say. I have zero agenda coming on this show. Yeah.
And that's where the truth, the core purity can come from. There's no agenda. It's just, listen, this is my depth of who I am and the contribution I'm creating in the world at some level. And Freeman, it's been great having you, brother. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, just one last thing from a sales perspective. And one of the things we talk about with the sales, because it comes into business, sales is a big part, is you're not selling anything. What you're doing is really resonating in what matters to you and why it matters, and being and talking about it from a place of why it matters. And people will naturally gravitate towards that. And those are the people you can serve. And so that's really the key. And when we're trying to sell and trying to push an agenda, it's dehumanizing to others. I don't want to do that in my life. I want to show up being and doing what I'm doing and be inspired by it and attract people who want what it is I'm doing and being and so forth and want to play. And I want what they won't have. And that's the exchange of good and service, the currency, if you will, the energy that I want to trade in my life.
It's just such a natural way of being, and that's really what works in our deepest heart. So thanks for grounding us back in that truth there. So where do people find you real quickly?
Free group to team, group2team.com. That's pretty much the sole thing I'm doing. I don't have any other websites at this point. Oh my goodness, I used to have 10, but it's just group to team, all spelled out, group2team.com.
And then also the show with Barnett. Where's that? People love to.
Yeah, so I think YouTube and Cutting Edge Conscious. It's Cutting Edge Consciousness is the show, but Cutting Edge Conscious is the YouTube site, and that's the best place where everything's aggregated. Like all past shows are there, and you can thumb through, run through those videos, listen to them if you don't want to watch. I mean, I like to sometimes go for a walk and listen to old shows and just pull.
Nice. Yeah. And how many shows did you guys do there? There's a lot.
I don't know. Hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah. Hundreds of shows.
Great, brother. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm certain the Dragon Tribe was served, and I am every time we talk, and I'm just so grateful for our friendship and the work that you're bringing in the world, man. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, brother.
I want to thank our guest for sharing his heart and brilliance with us. Thank you, Freeman Michaels. We're all so grateful for your contribution to the world. You can find out more about Freeman at group2team.com. And as we dive deeper into facing your dragon, I want to offer you the opportunity to discover the number one hidden fear stopping you from earning what you're worth. Be sure to take the 1-minute quiz at couragequiz.com. And if there's something here I mentioned that you want to review again, keep in mind we keep all the notes for you, including links to everything we talked about today. You can find show notes for this episode at faceyourdragon.com, episode 010. And finally, I would like to invite you to subscribe and leave a 5-star review for the Face Your Dragon podcast by visiting faceyourdragon.com/subscribe. Be sure to share this episode with your tribe on social media if it was useful for you. We'd love that. And join our conversation in the Face Your Dragon Facebook group as we talk more about your greatest fears being the very thing that will set you free. Tune in to episode 11 because I'll be talking with my dear friend, the amazing Scott Cody. Scott is the founder of the Association of Transformational Leaders, Southern California, and he's a genius in the power and grace of somatic and embodied wisdom. We discuss how important it is to get things in the muscle, but once you do, it's there for good, and how your business will boom when in a place of trust and knowing. This incredible being and many more on the Face Your Dragon podcast. See you on the next show. And remember, when you face your dragon and take the leap, you will break free.